This is Kate Baconsale. You're listening to Baconsale.
There are 35 pages and 124 illustrations in the average comic book. A single issue ranges in price from $1 to over $140,000. 172,000 comics are sold in the U.S. every day. The average collector owns 3,312 comics and will spend approximately 1 year of his or her life reading them. This is their story. Baconsale.
Way to go, Joel.
Oh, thank you.
You are very impressive.
Amazing. Thank you.
What a wide array of skills you have.
I appreciate that.
Like talking loudly and then talking quietly sometimes.
Did M. Night Shyamalan write that?
Well, I may have gotten inspiration from M. Night Shyamalan's title card to Unbreakable, yes.
He's now writing for Baconsale.
M. Night Shyamalan is writer for Baconsale?
He's in need of work.
So let it be known, so let it be written.
Put that in the promo.
We'd like to thank you for listening to our last episode, our Saturday Night Live episode.
Yeah.
Did we say I'm Joel?
No, we didn't.
I'm Joel.
I'm Kent.
And Jacob.
And welcome, and we'd like to thank you for listening to last week's episode.
It felt wrong.
About Saturday Night Live. A lot of people were sharing some of their favorite sketches, and some people were saying, you didn't include this one, to which I said, I talked about that on the show.
So next year, should we do another show?
2 years.
We're going to push it out 2 years?
Well, it either needs to be in like a few months
we got to do it before SNL gets canceled.
Oh, so sad.
Oh, too soon. But Cindy Rose Garrett said, I loved this episode, all caps on loved. I've been religiously watching SNL through the good years and the bad years. To which I say, that's exactly, Cindy, who we were doing this show for.
Yeah, totally.
People who were able to watch it. I mean, I haven't watched every episode, but at the same time, I didn't need to.
Also, Joel, you and I, we went through the characters or through the actors because we were saying on the show like how many we could guess.
Yes.
And I only said like 25.
Yeah, and I said you could probably
we
do more
easily
than that.
doubled that when we went through it.
We did a little competition at work on a break at work.
Yeah.
Where
A mental break.
We said, okay, we just need to kind of see how many actors we can name from SNL because they have 151 cast members. How many can we name? And we gave ourselves a time limit, and then we came up, and I had about 50.
Yeah.
And you had 61.
Yeah.
I didn't count the 62, but because you doubled.
I did 2 John Belushis just for fun.
John Belushi and Jim Belushi.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we thank you for listening to that. And also thank you to everyone who supports us via Patreon. In fact, we have a little bit of a giveaway. If you remember, Scary Date Night with Baconsale.
Scary Date Night with Baconsale.
That's exactly what I just said.
Jake, you were supposed to be there.
I know, I was off. Joel didn't set it up right. Come on, Joel. That's his fault.
Do it again.
Dare he? Scary. You're supposed to add that in post.
There you go.
That's what that was.
No.
Yeah,
did
it was
that
so good. I
after.
couldn't tell the difference.
So wrong. What it is if you are a patron of Baconsale, and anyone can become a patron of Baconsale. For only $3 a month, you get access to exclusive Bacon Bits, where we talk about random stuff like Jacob spilling diet squirts all over comic books.
Yeah.
Yes. If that sounds like thrilling content to you, listener, you need to be a
we've been
patron.
putting them out like almost every week, at least every other week.
So if you need a little more extra Baconsale, $3 a month will get you that. And then there's a bunch of other perks that come with being patron as well. But if anyone from the $3 range all the way up to the Bacon Council, anyone in there is going to be entered into a drawing October 1st.
Yes.
You'll be entered into a drawing to win an activity with us where we will go to a haunted house and to dinner, all of us together. And you will like it.
Or something else if you don't like it.
If you don't like dinner, we don't have to do dinner.
Yeah. You don't like food? What's wrong with you? Also, if you're a new patron or you upgrade in the month of September, we have this new little campaign that we call Torture Jake.
Torture Jake.
Unfortunately, some people have already gotten
Jake.
behind this, so I've got a list of some things I have to do.
So you can recommend a food or you can recommend a bad movie.
Yep.
Make it the worst movie you could possibly find.
Or just something you want me to review and talk about on the show.
If it's horror influenced, that would be
Or
great
maybe it's
because
terrible.
'tis the season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, we do
makes
have
sense.
a new patron, another person who is going to be entered into our Scary Date Night with Baconsale. I need the real thunder sometime. And then also they're going to be able to torture Jake, and that is Duncan Jewell.
Duncan Jewell.
Tier 1 name, Duncan. Well, way to
dope
go.
name.
He's also a tier 1 guy. I don't know if you knew that.
I don't know.
Yeah,
but-
he's been following us, Radio Ronin, and even back in the radio forever. So
Really?
welcome back, Duncan.
Huh. And thank you for being a patron of Baconsale. Speaking of patronage, what are we talking about today, Jacob?
Today, it's time to talk about the things Spencer loves.
Yeah.
That's what we're calling
Who's
it.
Spencer?
His
Yeah.
wife.
Spencer's our guest. Say hi to Spencer, everyone.
Hi, Spencer.
Hi, Spencer.
Spencer.
Hi, I'm Vengeance. I'm
Now,
the
can I ask you a
knight.
question, Spencer?
Yes,
Because online, I know you as Spencer Michael Myers.
that's correct.
Do you go by Spencer Myers or do you go by Spencer Michael Myers?
Yeah, I actually go by Spencer Myers. I can't go by Michael Myers. I've tried.
But Spencer Michael Myers, especially in
You should
Halloween,
just lean into
highly
that.
appropriate.
I lean into yours. Yeah. That's the only way you could do it. My dad knew what he was putting me into when he gave me that middle name.
He
Yeah.
did. You were
He
born
did.
after 1978.
Yeah. Well, and it's his middle name too. So
I just heard a family arguing
shared
because
that-
their last
that
name was
curse.
Parker, and they really wanted. One of them wants to name their son Peter.
What's wrong with that?
And well, the mom doesn't want to, right? But yeah, Michael Myers.
do you know
love it.
why his name is Peter Parker?
No, why?
It's because Stanley could not remember names. So all the names for Marvel characters are alliterative.
Makes
Bruce
sense.
Banner,
Interesting.
Peter Parker.
Captain America?
Not written by and
Steve
invented
Rogers?
by Stanley. That
Yeah.
was somebody
Wait a
different.
minute. Now I get it.
But we can dig into that.
Spencer is here. He's a long time. He's been a supporter of Baconsale for a long time. Patron of Baconsale. He came to our Bacon Council dinner. He's a good guy.
He got a song.
He got a
I'm a
song.
decent
Yes.
guy.
Welcome to the
Decent,
Bacon
somewhere between good and
Council,
decent.
Spencer.
We'll give him maybe awesome. I don't know, somewhere in there. Also, are you about to introduce this? So
No.
his love is comic books, as you might have just inferred.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of my many loves. I actually host a podcast on it, but we wanted to dig into kind of the history of comic books, let people know some of the background so they could jump in.
Well, it's funny because like years ago, we can't get into this yet. What am
Yeah.
I talking about?
We
years
have
ago, we
questions,
have
Joel.
questions
Many
for
years
Spencer.
ago.
We never forget.
I get test anxiety.
Okay, Spencer.
This is a really
I'm going to
tough
rapid
test.
fire question
All right.
these questions at you. I want
First
you to
one
give
that
your
comes to
answers
mind.
as quickly as possible. Don't overthink it. Even if you haven't seen one of the options, you can just say one of them and just make one of us really happy and one of us really angry. But
right.
there's no right or wrong answer, right, Ken?
Remember when you said lightning round? Go ahead.
If there's no wrong answer, why are you holding a knife?
That's just in case. Ready? Question 1. Which is better, Karate Kid 1 or Karate Kid 2?
Karate Kid 1.
All right.
It's just one question.
That's the only one I usually get. Which is worse, Star Wars Episode 1 or Star Wars Episode 2?
Star Wars Episode 2.
Yes. Do you rate movies using stars or letter grades?
Letter grades.
Okay. Which is more
'Cause it's not
America, Rocky 4 or Independence Day?
Rocky 4.
Okay.
Is Night Before Christmas a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie?
Halloween.
Okay. Buffy or X-Files?
Buffy.
Nice. Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Lord of the Rings, all the way.
Yeah.
Which movie is more Christmassy, Die Hard or Lethal Weapon?
Die Hard.
People just don't
People
know.
know.
Phantom of the Opera or Les Mis?
You're
Hey,
very
miss.
fast on that.
Les Mis. And Labyrinth or Never-Ending Story?
Never ending story.
That's very heavy, Ken.
When you
That
need
was heavy,
a
Kent,
luck
yeah.
dragon, there's nothing better.
I always need a luck dragon.
Everybody needs a luck dragon.
You don't get a luck dragon. You get a goblin king.
You
I'm
get
okay with that. 'Cause he reminds me of the
very
Babe.
awkward.
What
David
Babe?
Bowie.
Babe with the power.
What power?
It's not going to do this right now. So, Spencer, when you decided you were going to do a show and talked about doing comic books, your podcast, Spirit of 38,
Yeah.
is exclusively about comic books, correct?
That is correct.
Nice.
And we've referenced comic books here on the show because Kent has read a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have some experience. Jacob, I don't know what your experience is with comic books.
Let me think. None.
So, but it's
Okay.
interesting because we talk about relevant pop culture now, and not a lot of people read comic books anymore.
Well, that's what I was going to say before. I
So
got,
we talk movies
before
mostly.
That one hurts.
yeah,
before-
I'm sorry, but it's kind of true.
Before I interrupted myself with the questions, I was going to say it's
Yeah.
funny to me that it used to be back in the day. It was comic books, comic books and superheroes
Yeah.
and all that. It was just for the geeks and the nerds, the side people. But then nowadays, it's mainstream Hollywood big business, and a lot of movies that maybe people don't even realize are comic book adaptations.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I love this movie." And it's like, "Do you read comic books?" No, I wouldn't do that. And it's like, well, it's the same story.
Yeah.
Just in print form.
Oh, this started a long time ago. Men in Black,
Yeah.
comic book movie. The Mask, comic book movie.
Could
So-
you give me some good examples though?
Hey, Men in Black 1 is good. And The
One.
Mask is a classic comedy.
V for Vendetta, comic book movie.
Yeah,
No, I didn't know that.
Snowpiercer, comic book movie.
true story. Yeah,
Howard the Duck.
Snowpiercer.
Not a movie. That never happened.
didn't it exist? We probably erased it somewhere.
It's not even real.
But how I view this show, as we talked about, it's the history of comic books, and I think this is kind of we're going to talk about the big two, but I also want to find out from you, Spencer, the indie stuff, the hipster comics, if you will, and kind of like how everything came to be. We're going to try to cram this in a regular episode of Baconsale, which we could probably spend a month.
But I want to
on
say,
this.
even if you're not into comic books, consider this kind of an introductory course like we've done with
like
other
PlayStation,
things.
for example.
Yeah, it's
But
like,
honestly, it's good for anyone, whether they don't know anything about it. It'll be a good introduction. And if you're into comic books, we're going to talk about your loves.
should we call them comic books or should we call them graphic novels? What do you prefer?
These
Yeah.
are comic books. They're comic book characters.
These are
They're
different
superheroes.
things, right?
Okay.
The best way I've heard it put was comic book characters: Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Captain America. These are American mythology. The Greeks have the Greek gods. The Norse have the Norse gods, and their legends and their fables. Comic books, these are American fables.
So you're saying there's
I like
people
it.
out there that believe that these Superman and Batman are deity?
Were
Like
you in
Kent,
downtown Salt
or
Lake
you?
last week?
I wasn't. I saw that. Yeah,
All right. So
Yeah.
I think that answers your question.
it does.
So what we really wanted to do is kind of do a really high level introduction, give the history of comic books, because I feel like people appreciate a subject matter more when they can understand kind of the history where things come from.
I would agree.
And it gives you a good idea of where you can jump in.
Can I ask you real quickly though? What was your beginnings of comic books? Like, how did you get started into it?
Okay, this is really lame how I got started. I actually got started through Legos.
Okay,
So back in, it was early 2000s.
you built your own comics out of Legos.
No, not quite. Back in the early 2000s, they had the Lego magazine that they'd send you for free. And they're doing a cross promotion with their new Bionicle line. And DC sent comics along with the Lego magazine. I thought these were pretty cool. My dad saw me reading comics, bought me Spider-Man.
Was he proud? Or was he like, oh,
no.
no, we've lost another one?
My dad never read comic books.
Okay.
But he got a free one at work. He's like, my kid likes comic books. I'm going to bring him the Spider-Man comic.
Yeah.
It was the 35th anniversary of Spider-Man. It was a holographic cover and all that.
Ooh,
So I tore that things to shred, put comics away for a long time. And I went to, when I was about 12 years old, I went to California to visit family. And they didn't have anything better for me to do. So they said, kids like comics, boys like comics. We'll send them to a comic shop. I was kind of getting into Batman at that time.
as you should.
So I picked up a graphic novel of Robin to read on the plane home. I got home, went to my local comic shop, got a subscription box of Batman and Robin. And I've been collecting comic books since 12 years old until
Really?
Until now,
yeah.
14 years old.
There was a few breaks in between. You know, when I was in Rexburg, Idaho, there's no comic book shops up there, so I'd buy
Yeah.
them digitally.
Wait, there's no comic book shops
There's
in Rexburg?
zero comic book shops in Rexburg.
Idaho Falls?
I think so.
That is the closest one.
We just found
Okay.
Jacob's business idea.
There you go.
Yeah.
Comic shop in,
Is an open market for it.
I don't think it's too cold up there.
It's too cold for
It's
comic
too cold
books?
for anybody up there.
You lived there.
I lived there way too long. It's very cold.
That doesn't mean
Extremely
anything.
cool.
You know they invented indoors, Jacob, right?
In fact, you can read comic books indoors.
Can you?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, well, that's
incredible.
why I didn't like it. I was always trying to read outdoors.
Ken, is your comic book beginning similar?
I started right at 12. My dad, I think he was trying to get me into comic books because I've always liked to read, but I also love to draw. And so my dad said, well, here's the perfect meld of both. And so he took me to the mall. We went and bought The Death of Superman.
Is mall one of those like physical Amazons?
Oh, yeah. So a mall is a building with many stores.
Ah, okay, yes.
Side by side.
Yes.
I've seen
Yeah.
that in movies.
Like a strip mall.
Family friendly.
Okay.
But yeah, so he bought me The Death of Superman because we read in
That
the
was
paper
one of your first comic books?
that this was a big thing. And so I got it signed by the editor, and I was kind of like, I always loved Superman based on the movie and cartoons I'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time, like, my first exposure was reading Superman dying.
Wow.
And
That
I was
explains
like,
so much
that's
about
heavy.
you.
Yeah, it really does. And so after then, all I did was collect a few Superman ones, no Batman, straight X-Men. All I did was buy X-Men. And in X-Men 1
X-Men
was...
comics or
X-Men
X-Men?
comics. I bought X-Men.
You're mine now, Jean Grey.
But then I think I started to get a little insecure about it. I think at about 14, I quit reading comic books. Almost like wrestling, right? I think it's okay to like wrestling and comic books when you're really young.
You wrestled until you
And
were
then when you're
senior
like
in high school.
No.
He was
And-
inviting me to wrestle just yesterday.
But then no,
Come on my trampoline.
Later in high school, when I stopped caring what people thought, that's when I started wrestling again, and I think that's when I started reading comics again. But it was really about like my mid-20s. I was like, I started buying the graphic novels and the just compilations of comic book stories. And I just started to get really into it and realize that there are great stories out there that you shouldn't like shame the medium, even though it's a lot of pictures.
Although, fun fact, this is just a fun fact about the death of Superman. Does anybody know why they decided to kill Superman at that specific time?
I think it was just to gain readership. Like maybe Dwayne.
I think they were
something like that?
dying, right?
They were actually doing really well.
Oh, okay.
Selling wise, because they had Lois and Clark on the television.
Yeah.
It was actually cross promotion.
Second best
They were
Superman
going to
right there.
have
Oh, after
Lois and
Henry
Clark
Cavill? Yeah.
were going to get married in the TV show, and they were going to have it coincide with the comics, but they needed to kill a few months before Superman could get married at the comics at the same time as on the TV show. So they said, why not kill him?
Wow.
Wait, they had to kill a few months, so they killed one of the greatest heroes of all time?
Yep.
And it changed comics for good.
It changed
But we're
comics.
jumping ahead because
We are
I would
jumping
like to
ahead.
start from the beginning. And since we mentioned
It's a very good place to
Superman,
start.
and the name of your podcast is The Spirit of 38, could you please explain the origin of comic books? Or actually the origin of the uber hero?
Yeah. So
By the way,
origin
we're
of
going to
the-
get in the weeds in this one, so we'll try to hold back a little
that's
bit.
what I wanted to bring up, is you two are both heavy in the weeds of
Yes.
graphic novels and comic books. My experience with comic books was scattered, whatever I could find.
Yeah.
So like I'd go to my grandparents' house and they had a random Shazam comic or Captain Marvel comic, and so I'd read that. And then I had one that was like the Batman family, and it had like a bunch of different stories in this mini comic book, and like whatever I could find, I'd read. But I never went to a comic book store and sought them out.
You never clung on to one hero and said, I need to buy that T-shirt or get that backpack or anything?
No, the merch, sure, but never comic books. It was always whatever I could get. But nowadays, I try, like, I enjoy comic books. I've checked out a bunch of the classic ones from the library because I'm like, I should probably read The Killing Joke, just to see how it is.
The best place to get into comic books, I'll just throw this out right now, is your local library.
Yeah.
Most of them will have a lot of what are called trade,
right,
which is a collection of a specific story arc. So if you want a good story from beginning to end,
yes,
that's a fantastic place to start.
That's why it's so good, because these the graphic novels in the library, they take all these collections that came over months and months and months and months and put them in one book that you can read start to finish. It's so good. And also they have, obviously more mature comics where a little more violent language, things like that. But they also have ones for not even kids, but just like family-friendly ones, too.
Right in between.
Yeah, and when we wrap up, I've got some recommendations of things you could do to introduce your kids to comic books. In fact,
what about introducing him to Jake?
I would not recommend that at all.
Good call.
There's probably some comic books out there Jake would like.
Oh, introducing Jake to comics, not your kids.
Oh, yes.
Well played. Well played.
Seriously.
Wow.
I do have some comics that I could recommend to Jake. Joel, I actually brought some tonight.
As long as there's no kids involved.
As long as no kids involved. I brought some tonight that I could show you afterwards.
Kids?
Specifically.
Here we go.
Comics.
Boy.
For each one of you to specifically show you. And you can throw that up on Patreon.
Well,
or on
and I want
Twitter.
to bring this up, too, is that I know that some kids, especially when they're younger, maybe struggle with liking reading. And comic books, at least I've found, are a great way to get your kids excited about reading because it's not that many words, but it tells a story. It's visual.
I can tell better stories, honestly.
yeah.
Joel,
Let me try.
specifically for you, this is one that I would recommend for kids.
What is
this?
that?
Is called Bone. And it is recommended by a lot of
He looks like an Elmer
by a
Fudd
lot
type
of
character.
experts, specifically for kids who struggle with reading and wanting to get into reading. This is written and illustrated by Jeff Smith. He actually used to be an animator, so a lot of the panels flow like an animation.
Oh, okay.
The great thing about this is it's got lore that's super, super in-depth. It's almost Lord of the Rings depth lore, but still accessible for kids.
Bone.
So this is Bone by Jeff Smith.
Jeff Smith.
And we learned from Dr. Matt really early on when we started Baconsale that he uses, in therapy, he uses comic books to get people to read and to get people to relate to certain characters and archetypes. And so, there's so much there. But Spencer, take us back to the beginning, if
Let's
you would.
go back to the beginning. Come with me now to 1938. The reason that The Spirit of 38, my podcast, is called that is because that is when Superman was first introduced to the world.
And Superman is the beginning of comics.
Superman is not just the beginning of comics, the beginning of superheroes.
Okay.
So comics existed well before 1938. You had Tarzan that was in comic form. You had a lot of these genre comics, Western comics, mystery, true crime comics. They weren't quite in vogue and they weren't really popular. Superman was the first popular superhero.
Okay.
And kind of the archetype for all superheroes that came from that point on. He was invented by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two Jewish boys growing up in New York. They were immigrants, so they kind of wove a lot of their personal story into Superman, who they wanted to be, and kind of his immigration story was their immigration story. Something that people speculate is actually Joe Shuster's father was murdered in New York, so he put like the elements of being bulletproof and being invulnerable.
We could do a whole show on those.
We could do a whole show on those, and
That's interesting.
I've done a whole show on that if you want to listen to The Spirit of 38. But we're not here just to talk about Shuster and Siegel. Comic books have obviously evolved and grown. In fact, you start with DC. Superman was introduced in Action Comics, and we're going to get to the DC part of that. But shortly after, in 1941, is when Timely Comics started. Timely Comics evolved into Atlas Comics, and it eventually turned into
Wait, when did
Marvel
Timely Comics come out?
This is about 1941.
Doesn't seem very timely.
Wow.
Oh, Timely Comics will have their day in the sun, but that doesn't come for another 20 or so years. Stanley was actually at Timely Comics from the beginning. He was actually what was kind of a paper boy. So for the artists, he would run and grab new paper for them to continue drawing. He'd fill their inkwells. Really, whatever they needed him to do is what he did. That same year, 1941, is when Batman was introduced by the scoundrel Bob Kane.
I saw that in your presentation.
Yeah.
So he's a scoundrel. Can you explain that?
Because everyone calls Bob Kane the creator of Batman.
So we'll put this in a presentation that the rest of patrons can see.
We'll put it on patreon.com/baconsale.
The Batman that Bob Kane, he really just wanted to cash in on the superhero craze because there are superheroes popping up left and right trying to imitate Superman. So he created a Batman that wore a red unitard, had mechanical wings, blonde hair, and a domino mask.
What?
A domino mask? What is a domino mask?
A domino mask is that superhero mask that just covers your eyes, and that's it.
Oh, like the Incredibles kind of put that on.
Yeah, that's a domino mask.
Hashtag not my Batman.
Hashtag not your Batman.
Not anyone's Batman.
Not anyone's Batman.
Hashtag dominoes.
Wait, so how long did he actually last?
Bob Kane?
This version, not Bob Kane. This version of Batman.
This first Batman didn't even see one issue.
Oh, okay.
Bob
good.
Kane took this drawing, this very rough drawing and concept, to his friend Bill Finger. And Bill Finger is the one that actually created the Batman that we know and recognize. He made him more of a detective. He added the gray suit and the bat ears. He added the butler. He created the Joker. Everything you know and associate with Batman actually comes from Bill Finger.
How come Bob Kane gets the credit then?
Because Bob Kane sold out Batman from under Bill Finger. And he continued to take the credit and push down credit of Bill Finger for years. Bill Finger actually never got credit for creating Batman until Batman v Superman in 2016.
Wow.
What?
That's
How did it finally come out?
Bill Finger's kids actually dug up all the evidence, dug up everything. Bill Finger passed away without ever receiving credit, really, for creating Batman.
Unreal.
So why was he never like, hey, I created Batman?
Bob Kane had so much control, so much legal control over the character of Batman that
I think we need to know
Bill
what we need to
Finger
do now. Bill Finger, this episode's for you.
Yeah, dedication.
dedicated. There's actually a really, really good documentary on this on Hulu. Check it out. That gives you a lot more in depth. And we could even do a whole episode on Bob Finger.
You know,
Bill
I kind
Finger
of
and
want
Bob Kane.
to, right?
One day.
Yeah, one day.
One day. Today's not that day. Remember, this is 1941. Can anyone tell me what happened in 1942?
The end
There's
of
some
World
skirmish, right?
World War II. So a lot of superheroes that stemmed from World War II on were very American themed. So 1941, near the end, is World War II starting to ramp up and we haven't officially entered, is where we see the introduction of Wonder Woman. That's a whole can of worms we're not going to get into on this episode. But more importantly,
We talked about her a little bit with the Dr. Matt show.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, that's a big can of worms. But who's more American than Captain
Independence
America?
Day. Oh, right.
Right. Rocky is more
Yeah,
American.
thank you. Yeah, but Captain America was it 1942?
19 near the end of 1941,
Okay.
1942. Captain America really was the last big superhero created before the end of World War II. After World War II, you see not superheroes, but your GIs are coming back from World War II, and superheroes are starting to fall out of vogue.
Why is that?
A lot of people are shell-shocked. They want to be more grounded in reality. In this time, you see a rise in genre comics. If you recall, before Superman, there was a lot of Western comics, detective comics. You see the same things start to come back. Western comics are huge. Horror comics are really big, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Science fiction comics, romance comics. Well,
that was the era, right? There was
This is
some
the era.
paranoia with other countries, and so sci-fi stuff was really big. You could see that in the movies at the time. Obviously, westerns about 10 years later got really big.
This
And-
is before television.
Yeah. So radio plays and whatnot.
Radio plays. This
Okay.
is your source of entertainment was walk to the newsstand and pick up a comic book for a nickel.
Yeah.
The problem was about this time, someone named Frederick Wortham saw a rise in delinquency. Really, if you want to dig into this, my degree's in sociology, so I find
Delinquency? What kind of delinquency?
this fascinating.
Juvenile
Delinquency.
Like from school?
So not missing school, so breaking windows, gangs are
Or
forming.
delinquency,
Jake's
not as in
childhood.
like being late.
Kids
but-
getting in
yeah.
trouble.
Jets and the Sharks.
Okay.
You can argue where this is coming from. My background in sociology, I like to look at this, and you kind of got to realize people are coming back from the war. The economy's starting to recover. You're seeing the formation of the middle class. So all these kids that would have been working before now just have free time. So naturally, if kids have a lot of free time and nothing to do,
They're going to break some windows.
they're going to break some windows. They're going to tip some cows.
You relate to that,
know?
right, Jacob?
No, what are you talking about?
Listen to the Mom Show.
Yep.
Anyway, Frederick Wortham saw this delinquency and he wanted to attribute it to comic books. So he wrote a book called The Corruption of the Innocent. And he called for some form of censorship in comic books. Now, this is going to start kicking off the next age of comics.
how much censorship was needed back then? I only ask because as a film major, I know there was the Hays production code for the longest time when they just would not allow certain things in movies.
Yeah,
So
there couldn't be much of anything.
You get before like the 1968 and you're going to get basically squeaky clean mainstream films. So comic books, I mean, how much censorship was needed? How bad were they?
Was it before this that Batman was shooting people?
This was before this Batman was shooting people.
That's
There
right.
was a lot of violence.
Batman had a gun.
Yeah, he did.
Very much.
All you purists
and
out
had
there.
used it all the time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just Batman shooting people. In Western comics, there was a lot of violence with people dying. But the biggest one was horror comics.
And Superman used to kill people, right?
Absolutely.
Always has.
All the time.
Oh, really?
Threw people off buildings.
Oh, nice.
Nice. Really nice. Way to go, Kal-El.
Yeah.
Again, I don't
Kal-El.
recommend
Wait, you didn't let anybody down there.
introducing any kids to Jacob. It's more the horror comics. And there was some issues that Frederick Wortham had with Batman and Robin.
Are we talking Tales from the Crypt, that sort of
Tales
thing?
from the Crypt, EC Comics. In fact, these horror comics are becoming so popular that Captain
the
America.
40s?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is actually closer like 1958, 1960 is when
Okay,
you're
so
seeing
around
this.
that era.
Yeah. So GIs have come back. The war's over. Economy's recovering. Kids have free time. So it's about 1958, 1960, 61. In that area, that Frederick Wortham is seeing this delinquency and trying to call for a new form of censorship. Because really, before that, anything goes in comics. And as Kent mentioned, it's Tales from the Crypt. It's these horror comics where you'd see people flayed alive and all these other horrific things that Frederick Wortham wanted to, and somewhat rightfully so, there needed to be kind of a governing body saying, kids are reading these, we need to kind of track what they're reading.
Okay.
So they created what
The
was
kids
called...
will be fine.
They'll work it out. They created what's called the Comic Code Authority. Now, the Comic Code Authority, this
the
is...
CCA, yeah.
Yeah, the CCA. They were kind of like the secret police. They really did call it the CCA.
I just made that up.
Yeah, but
I'm really good with
They
that.
really
That's what it
did.
is.
You
Very
took letters,
clever.
made an acronym.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You need to understand the CCA if you want to understand comics post 1960s. We're in what's called the Bronze Age.
The Silver Age,
Silver
right?
Age. Yeah, Silver Age. So the Bronze Age.
We were then.
We were in the Bronze Age. Now we're in the Silver Age.
Like now we are?
No.
Oh.
We're gonna.
Oh, we're talking
get
about
to
the
that.
Silver
Talking
Age.
about
Okay.
the Silver Age.
We're in the modern age, Joel, or postmodern. Are we postmodern?
No, we're modern.
No,
Okay.
we're modern age.
Come on, let's go up another level.
So it goes, there's a golden age, which is 1938 to 1956.
So that's basically Batman and Superman running the show.
Yes.
Yep.
Then there's a silver age, which is 1956 to 1970.
That's with the Silver Surfer running the show.
Yeah, probably. There's the bronze age, which is 1970 to 1985. And then there's the modern age, which is 85 to present.
So is this on purpose that it's like a descending?
You're going to see
fall
because
here?
the characters change. For me, that's what signifies it is like Superman and Batman will change who they are. The Marvel characters will become a little more human, a less godlike.
When
for
did you
example.
say the modern one began?
1985.
Oh, that's a
So
long
you're telling
time.
me with all those writers out there, they couldn't come up with another age? Come on,
Yeah,
writers.
that's what I'm thinking.
That's why we've been in the modern age for so
Yeah.
long.
Just can't get good writers.
That's why it needs to be postmodern.
I
now.
would say we are in a postmodern age, but that's
Boom.
we'll
Nailed
get
it.
there in a minute.
Verified by Spencer.
few minutes.
Did you hear
Well,
that?
and I don't think they called themselves the Golden Age when they were in the Golden Age. I think it's once you leave.
Oh, no,
an
they
age,
absolutely
you look
did.
back.
Oh, they did?
No.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
They're like, we're in the golden age now, boys.
Enjoy it, fellas. We're in the Golden Age of comics. Try a cigarette in Superman's hand. Golden Age of comics.
You could not do that under the CCA.
Oh.
You couldn't show any form of violence. You couldn't show any form of
Wait, any form of violence, meaning even punching?
punching was off limits.
What?
So they
What
started
did
to.
Batman do? They take away his
Batman-
gun? They take away his punching?
That's exactly the point. There wasn't much for them to do.
So they weren't popular, so there wasn't a big deal. It didn't ruin the comics at the
It
time.
didn't ruin the comics. It wasn't until Flash was reintroduced in about 1956 that superheroes even started to make somewhat of a comeback.
Okay.
So Flash is coming back. People are starting to get interested in comics again. Marvel is now officially changed its name to Marvel Comics. This is about 1961. And Marvel is about to have their time in the spotlight. One of the things you'll notice with comic books from the Silver Age on is Marvel and DC come and go in waves.
Okay.
At one moment, Marvel's going to be top dog. The next moment, DC's going to be top dog.
So, I mean, in what century is DC going to come back on top?
If you
We'll
look
get
at
there.
comic books, they're selling better now.
They are selling
That was mostly
better
just a
comic
dig at
books right
Ken.
now.
Yeah, but
No, but it feels
it's
really-
research.
Is that compared to not
Here's the
selling?
thing.
Is that what it is?
It makes sense though, because when I was a kid, it was all Batman, Superman, Aquaman, the Justice League, and I remember when they started talking about doing Avengers movies, I was like, Avengers? Who
Yeah.
wants to see the Avengers?
We're gonna
And
get
now
to
my
that.
kids.
Exactly.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, now my kids are totally about Avengers, so I see the DC Marvel back
Yeah.
and forth, even in my home.
Well, 1960s were Marvel's decade. That's when they introduced Spider-Man. What Stan Lee really did, he's now the editor-in-chief. So he's starting to take control of which creators are... which
He's reading a lot of DC comics, then copying the characters and giving them different names, right?
He's just telling that to Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
They do come up with a lot of original comic book characters. Now, this is contested. I don't want to get too controversial. Stan Lee didn't actually create any of these characters.
What?
He just named them.
Rest in peace, Stanley.
But
Wait, he just named them?
Well, he created some, didn't he? And Kirby created others. You saying he didn't create any?
it's
Wait, when you say
very-
name them, was he like, create a character called Spider-Man, and they do it?
That's exactly what he did.
What?
So Spider-Man was created in 1960. Was it Fantastic Four? Let me check my notes.
Yeah, Fantastic
do.
Four first, and then
Yeah,
Spider-Man.
Fantastic Four in
Take
1961.
your
That
time.
was
Ken
all
can edit
Jack
it all
Kirby.
out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
1963 was Spider-Man, and Stan Lee says his inspiration for Spider-Man was he saw a spider on his wall and he says, "Give something those powers." And Jack Kirby came up. Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko
Keep in
came
mind,
up with everything else.
Ken gave a really side eye to that comment, to that fact. Keep in mind, the original Batman got inspiration from being Batman because a bat flew in his window.
I didn't actually give a side eye. I was actually thinking, what
That
a
was the
great
story
time.
of Batman.
What a great time to be alive when certain characters didn't exist, and you could actually say, I want a character to be this way. And it wasn't already done.
That's
Really.
the thing. Is there
that'd be
anything
crazy.
people can do now? Any
No, I
power
don't-
you can give someone
I
that
don't
wouldn't
think
have already
so.
been done?
I don't know
New-
about powers, but there are new ways to tell stories, and that's kind of what ushers in the modern age. But 1960s, that was Marvel's time. They created, within 1961 to 1963, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk.
You've heard
All
of some of
them
these, right?
Came out, and the culmination was in end of 1963 was the X-Men. And the X-Men was used as kind of a platform to discuss social issues in America. They were used as a soapbox at this time for racial issues, and they've continued to kind of be that soapbox.
The weird thing was,
up
Hugh
until
Jackman
now.
actually was Wolverine back then.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I've seen Days of Future Past.
He ages so well.
He does.
Actually, Wolverine wasn't introduced till the early 70s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Was
they
that
had
long
the
after?
X-Men First Class.
I knew it was a while after. I didn't know it was that
yeah.
long after.
And
So
he wasn't
they-
even a mutant at that time.
Yeah.
What was he?
He was supposed to be a mutated Wolverine.
A short Canadian.
Oh, that's why they call him Wolverine. Short and stocky Canadian.
Hey, bub. Hey.
Yeah, bub.
So that is the what we call the Silver Age,
It was the 60s and 70s.
60s and 70s.
Okay.
1971 is kind of when we're going to go into the next stage, which is
The Bronze Age?
bronze.
I feel like this is where
Silver,
things
bronze.
get grimy. I feel like
This is where
70s
things
and
really
early
get
80s are
grimy.
really grimy.
And that's because
I mean, as decades, for
Well,
sure.
Do you mean the content is grimy?
yeah,
Yeah.
content.
Okay.
The content
well, I
gets
mean,
really,
matches,
really
it
grimy.
matched the era.
Yeah,
once
that
again,
makes sense.
once again to relate it to me, because I wanted about me here. In film, that when they got the rid of the Hays production code and decided they were going to do movie ratings instead, where they were going to
Yeah.
let people do whatever they wanted, but they were going to give a certain rating. That's why so many R-rated movies came out in the 70s and NC-17 movies, because they were just like, oh, we can do anything? Let's go crazy. So it became a grimier era for film, and it sounds like it was the same for comics. But what about the CCA?
the CCA still existed. In fact, the CCA is the reason that comics were so squeaky clean up until the 1971 issue of Amazing Spider-Man 96.
Spider-Man?
Was this the
broke
drug
family-friendly
special?
barrier?
This is a drug special. The federal government actually came to Stan Lee and said, look, your comics are killing it right now. Kids really enjoy this. We need you to do an anti-drug special. Now, up to this point, all comics that if they wanted to be sold officially on a newsstand had to have what's called the Comics Code, a seal. So it's this like little stamp thing that was in the corner of the comic book. Stan Lee wrote the story about very, very anti-drug message, put it in Spider-Man, sent it to the Comics Code Authority, and they rejected it.
Oh.
To show you how strict the Comics Code Authority was, this is a fun fact.
They could say no to the government. Is it
They could
sounds
say
like.
no to the
Yeah.
government. But there's a writer named Marv Wolfman. He wrote
Censor that name. It's Wolfman.
exactly what happened.
What?
So this is a creator
What?
of the Teen Titans,
Right.
which you may
Teen
recognize.
Titans Go. Yeah.
What?
No,
I've never
no.
heard of that.
That's blasphemy.
But I've heard of the Teen Titans. Marv Wolfman created the Teen Titans,
I like this guy.
and he wrote a story And in the story, he was putting himself in as a narrator. It says, as presented by the Wolfman with a capital W because his last name's Wolfman.
Right.
And the Comics Code Authority rejected it
But why?
because they weren't allowed to show anything supernatural.
It sounded aggressive and
Wait,
supernatural.
wait. They couldn't show anything supernatural? These are superheroes.
They couldn't show anything supernatural. So superheroes are fine because they have superpowers, but not anything supernatural. A wolfman being a werewolf, not okay.
So when you say supernatural, you're more speaking of like occult kind of stuff.
yeah, occult, magic. They
Yeah.
couldn't show magic. They couldn't show occult. They couldn't show death. They couldn't show
we
drugs.
learned in our werewolf episode we did a couple Halloweens ago about how werewolves originally came from like pentagrams and devil worshipping and things like that. So maybe that's what it was associated with instead of just being
Really strict.
No,
People
they
being
were
really
really
strict.
strict.
Yeah.
Even if it was scary in any way.
It seemed like it was building up to such extremes that it needed to shatter immediately.
And that's exactly what happened with that 1971 issue of Spider-Man. Because Stan Lee submitted it to the CCA and they said, no, this has drug content. Well, the federal government told me to publish this as an anti-drug, and it's a very obviously an anti-drug story.
No, just talk about that.
So,
talk about the abolishment of drugs without talking about drugs. It's easy. What are you talking about?
For sure.
So Stan Lee said publish it anyway. So they published it without the Comics Code seal of approval, and the comics sold just fine.
Where did they sell it though? If not at newsstands?
They put it on newsstands anyway.
Oh wow!
Wait, so the CCA actually had no authority
They
whatsoever?
had no authority.
This whole
But
time they were holding
everyone
this in-
agreed to just follow what they said.
They agreed.
Basically, they're holding up this invisible barrier,
Yeah,
saying,
I mean-
"Don't cross it."
Please.
That's exactly
So
what
what
happened.
was the
with-
threat before that without that stamp
get
no
a
one
fine.
would buy it? Or they get a fine
They
from
get a fine, or
sounds-
this
it's-
was a way for parents to know, don't let your kids read this.
It sounds like a non-government entity though, right?
So Stanley
an
saw this and he
entity
said,
that could
going
fine them?
forward, we're doing whatever. DC was like, yeah, us too.
Yeah, exactly what
Okay.
happened. In fact, Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams were writing Green Arrow and Green Lantern at the time. And funny thing is, Neil Adams, the artist, this is a fun fact about the Comic Code Authority and how it actually made things worse. He couldn't show death in comics, and he was originally a horror artist. But he could show inanimate objects being harmed. So rather than just killing somebody, when he was writing the Spectre for DC, he'd have the Spectre turn somebody into a candle and then melt them.
Oh wow!
And that was okay because
horrible.
the candle was being
seems
melted.
worse.
That sounds
not
like
a person.
personal crypt.
He said it was really fun to find those workarounds.
Yeah.
Anyway, Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams were writing Green Lantern and Green Arrow at the time, and that's when they wanted to address their own issues. They started talking about drug use, and that's when Speedy, the Green Arrow's sidekick,
I love sidekicks
developed
so
a
much.
heroin addiction.
Speedy? Speedy got a heroin addiction?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Wait.
Why couldn't it be cocaine
What year was this?
or meth?
This was about
Not meth.
1973.
Not even
Heroin?
once.
Okay.
So this is
It seems a little like 20 years too soon to have a heroin overdose.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But this is when these characters, these writers are realizing the Comic Code Authority has no teeth. They can't stop us from publishing what we want to publish. So they start crossing those thresholds. I'm talking about racism. They start talking about drugs and then getting grittier and grittier. The beginning of the 80s is when you start seeing creators like Frank Miller and Alan Moore, which you might recognize
From The Watchmen,
from The Watchmen and from
Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns.
Killing Joke,
Yep. Killing Joke as well.
Alan Moore wrote the Killing
Long
Joke.
Halloween.
That's Jeff Loeb.
Oh, okay.
But we don't want to get too into the weeds
Yeah.
of writers and creators.
But these are the things. Is so when I went to Kent and I said, "Hey Kent, I'm looking to read some of the big Batman comics."
Yeah.
that we
Like the
talked about on
quintessential
show.
Batman
the one that
comics.
He's like, "Hey, read these ones."
Because you're a fan of Big Batman.
It was
It's an old reference right there.
It's like season 1 reference.
Yeah,
But he gave me these recommendations, and every single one of them was one of these '80s dark Batman killing type comics.
Well, noir Batman stories.
Noir
is kind of what
killing,
I was going
murder,
for.
death, Batman.
And that's something I wanted to
Advanced
talk
gaming
about. That's part of the reason comic books are so much fun is because you can have the same character and they're like actors in a play or characters in a play. Depending on who steps into the role is how the story is going to be interpreted. Unlike, say, Harry Potter, who's written one way. Well, never mind. That's a terrible example because of J.K. Rowling.
Oh, because she can
Unlike-
change it at any time.
Yeah, unlike Frodo, who in the book is always going to be Frodo, and that is the character that of Frodo for time and all eternity. These characters can change with the different eras or depending on who's writing them. Jeff Loeb, who can't recommend it to you, likes to write a very detective and cerebral Batman. Frank Miller I think he got dropped on his head as a child.
Wow.
Real angry Batman.
What if he listens to the show? I don't think he knows how to use
listener.
technology. But he writes a very, very angry, gritty.
He did like Watchmen, Sin City. What
He
else?
did. No, he didn't do Watchmen.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Oh no, Alan Moore did Watchmen. That's right.
He did 300, Sin
300,
City,
that's what I was-
and Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. So these very, very
And
gritty
Year
ones.
One, Batman Year
Batman
One.
Year One. I have found that Frank Miller does his best work when he's not the artist as well, when he's just the writer, and even then, it's decent work. Alan Moore, though, from that decade, really kind of set the foundation of the superstar writer, where people are actually more interested in who's writing than the character that they are writing.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So this actually brings us to the modern era.
But can we talk about Watchmen while we're here?
Yeah, this is
Because
fantastic
Watchmen
time.
is one of these graphic novels, and I actually have it here. And if you've probably seen the yellow cover
Prove it.
somewhere at Barnes
Where
and
is it?
Noble, it's somewhere over there. But this is the one you'd see at Barnes and Noble when that existed in Borders.
I remember those. Yeah.
And,
They were next to the Hastings.
and they basically brag because they should. Time magazine in 2005 did a 100 best novels of all time, and Watchmen's graphic novel made it as one of the 100
Oh,
best
that's cool.
novels.
a graphic novel was in the list of greatest novels.
Greatest novels. This thing is so long and in depth, and there's a movie that came out in 2009, but there's so much detail there, and it really was a work of art. Even though it's kind of hard to take for a lot of people.
It is really hard, and that's one of those ones you have to read multiple times to really understand everything. In fact, interesting fact
I
about
watched the
Watchmen,
movie once and I got it all.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what the big deal is.
but what they can't
Yeah.
do in the movie that they do in the book is that book is written in chiasmus.
Oh.
If you're familiar with what that is,
Why would it
at
be in
all.
chiasmus?
It's a writing technique where you're kind of building to a center and then everything
It
kind of
mirrors,
leads to that.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually to a point where it's not just the whole story is a chiasmus, but individual pages and individual panels are written that way.
And who did that one?
Alan Moore did that one. Alan Moore also wrote The Killing Joke, which changed the character of Batman forever. In fact, Batgirl was in a wheelchair from The Killing Joke up until
And she became horrible.
Like 3, 4, or probably maybe 10 years ago.
it was up until the New 52.
Okay.
So about 2000.
We're jumping the gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Killing Joke. Sorry, that was too soon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Joker actually ends up shooting Batgirl, if you don't know, and it's a horrific moment
It
in the
is a
comics.
that is a hard book to read if you're not bracing yourself for what you're reading.
Yeah.
Especially the movie The Dark Knight is actually based partly on this, that if one person has a bad enough day that they can flip.
Yeah.
And somebody good can become somebody bad.
Okay.
So it's fun once you start reading kind of these seminal character stories to see in the movies what they draw from
Okay. I would agree.
and what they adapt. And they do best when they don't try to directly adapt one story, but take elements from each one. Anyway, 1985 is about the beginning of the modern era of comic books. This is when comic book creators start to become bigger than the actual brand that they're writing for. This is about when Kent started reading X-Men. And I think it's really interesting that you brought up X-Men because two of the biggest stars in comic books at that time were both on X-Men.
Jim Lee.
Jim Lee, who's now the creative art director for DC Comics. So everything DC
Traitor.
has to go through him.
Have you read Batman Hush?
Yes.
He drew that one.
Oh, that was a good one.
He's
I've got a couple books
amazing.
here drawn by Jim Lee. He's a fantastic artist.
Well, that's one thing we really haven't talked about, by the way, because we've talked about a lot about story, but the art.
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what goes into a comic book?
It's
but we'll get
amazing to
there.
read these. Like, I just have, like, when you said Hush, I immediately have this visual in my head, and I'm like, that's someone's drawing that's
Yeah.
permanently in my head now.
Well, and it's really interesting when you start to break down not just who the artist is, because when you say the artist, you think one person drew, colored, and did everything.
Right.
But in comic books, it's the penciler, the inker, and the colorist. And depending on that team...
Plus
it can-
the writers.
Plus the writers, yeah. But depending on just speaking art,
Right.
strictly art, depending on the team of the inker, the penciler, and the colorist can drastically change how something turns out.
Yeah, you put a picture of that in your presentation where it showed like the different inkers going like doing something different on Hulk pencil drawing.
Yeah.
and it gave him like a different look. Like he looked like a different character each time.
Something else inkers are in charge of is the background. So if you see a really detailed background, that's because that inker took the creative decision that I want to go really detailed with this background.
There's so much work that goes into these.
There's so much. But
Okay, so you're talking about creators being bigger than the characters, but it seems
Exactly.
like egos will be involved. Whether from the big two, we have DC and Marvel, and then people that write and draw for them are almost bigger than DC or Marvel. So it seems like there would be some heads butting.
And that's exactly what happened.
Segue.
We mentioned Jim Lee and Chris Claremont. They were writing X-Men. They were bigger than Marvel. People were seeking out their art and their writing just for them. You also had creators like Willis Polanco.
Never heard of that.
He bigger in the 85. He's kind of, There's another one out there that I'm not going to mention because I hate his art, and he's become a living internet meme.
Just say
and
it.
I don't think he even realizes it.
Oh, I know. It's Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, it's Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
Once again,
He's the one that
I feel like I'm a Jacob here.
he drew Deadpool, and he
Joel?
drew characters with tiny feet and the giant Captain America with a huge torso.
Oh yeah,
You've seen
he's
that.
the one you said that he has no concept of anatomy.
He has no concept of anatomy.
Because it's like Captain America honestly looked like he was like a funnel.
It was also
Yeah.
very 90s. The 90s were all about, like, there's a lot of over sexualization of characters.
We're still doing that. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll never stop.
This is the 90s, you said?
Yeah, the 90s.
the early 90s.
And there was this,
so
like,
this is like 89,
attitude
85.
look.
Or
Yeah.
89 to 92, 93.
Okay.
But what happened was you had Jim Lee, Chris Claremont, Rob Liefeld all creating these characters, but not getting... Oh, Todd McFarlane. I forgot Todd McFarlane.
Huge.
Of
How could
course.
I fit...
You know Todd McFarlane, though,
Yeah,
don't you?
he's great on Family Guy.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
That physically hurt me.
I know. Who is he? I don't know who
So
he is.
Todd McFarlane, you have
He created Venom.
Venom, yeah.
Okay.
You have specific artists that define a character for an era.
Okay.
He defined Spider-Man from 1980s onward.
Okay.
Now you have Jeff Bagley Jr. Before that, it was John Romita Sr., not Jr. John Romita Jr. is a terrible artist.
I thought so
We won't
too.
get into that. But Todd McFarlane created Venom. He created Carnage. He was one of those...
So he's really one note there. It's just like Venom, Carnage, and any other symbiote. That was kind of his thing.
We're going to get to that because him, Jim Lee, and Chris Claremont, Rob Liefeld, and a couple of these other superstar creators wanted more control of their creations. They wanted more money. They were getting paid basically nothing to create these mega stars for these publishers.
Do you think
The
that's the
publishers
case?
were getting all the money then?
Marvel was getting most of the money. Marvel was having another resurgence.
So their talent got very little. Would you say that's been the case all through comics history?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even now?
Not anymore.
Okay. So go
So-
on. Sorry.
These guys, this core group of the bad boys of comics, is what they would call themselves at the time, got together.
but it's
and-
a true story.
I know, but it's just one of those things like,
Right.
the bad
It's
boys
like,
of comics.
you might as well say we're in the golden age.
They're
you know?
the toughest third graders on the class.
Well, it kind of seems like we had an SNL show last week, and we talked about the like the bad boy era with Sandler and Farley and whatnot, and they got too big for the show. They had movie deals, and so they got fired from the show for almost being showboats, essentially.
And that's exactly what happened. Is they said to Marvel, "We demand more money. We're bringing all this money for you. You actually have to pay us what we're worth." Marvel said no, so they started their own company. They started Image Comics. They launched with Todd McFarlane's creation, Spawn,
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
you know Spawn,
I know
right?
Spawn.
Yeah.
talking about one-note creations.
Yeah,
he
there
created
you go.
Spawn, which
Spawn.
is basically a
Venom. Yeah.
hell symbiote.
Yeah.
So you can censor me if you need to.
It's
HELO.
okay. You're talking about the place.
We're talking about the place. Their whole crux was any creators that want to do a comic and own the character, own the rights, what happens to them, and get the majority of the publishing money, come write for us, come draw for us.
But then, what did they get out of it? If
They published it.
right, but I mean, if the artists are getting most of the money,
Well, they're
what does
just
the
making it
publisher get?
easier to
They're
publish.
making the money off
Well,
the
and
publishers.
they still kept making comics, so they still kept
Yeah.
getting their own money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're getting money from...
It's like a co-op. Of
Yeah.
comic
Sounds
essentially.
like, yeah.
Okay.
And this actually led to a lot of other comic book companies very similar, like IDW. IDW, their big creation and their big brand is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Which a lot of people don't know were a comic first.
They were a comic first, and what even more people don't know is it is a parody of Daredevil.
What?
Wait, how? None of the turtles are blind.
None of the turtles are blind, but they were created...
And they're turtles.
According to...
But that too.
in the sewer and there's a
Wait,
rat.
Daredevil's not a turtle? I didn't see season
can't tell
3.
me under the mask.
I don't know.
But according to Eastman and Laird, who created the Ninja Turtles, they're a big fan of Frank Miller's Daredevil
The Man
series.
Without Fear series.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Ninja Turtles were created in the same accident that gave Matt Murdock
What?
his powers. Now, it gets even further than this. Who does Daredevil fight?
Kingpin.
The Ninja
Oh,
Clan.
Bullseye. Oh, Foot Clan?
Nope, that's the Ninja Clan.
hand.
It's the hand.
And who trained Daredevil?
The
Stick.
yeah. Oh my gosh, Splinter.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So the Ninja Turtles are a parody homage to Daredevil.
Well, isn't it true also that Ninja Turtles didn't even have colored? They didn't have different.
They
colored
didn't have
masks
colored masks.
to
There's a lot
identify
of.
them? Did they have
creators-
the names of Leonardo?
They had the same names.
Okay.
They were created for an art project for their class, and then they tied it all in.
And it became a
IDW.
best-selling
Save it
comic
for a
book
Ninja Turtle
toy
show.
line.
In
Would
fact,
be.
We should do
Yeah,
a
that
show.
seems
If you
real.
grew up watching Ninja Turtles, I do not recommend reading the initial comic books because they are very violent. They're very gritty.
Sounds
Again,
cool.
they're supposed to be parodies.
Ken's
of
buying it right now
Daredevil.
on his
Right up
phone.
my alley.
It's pretty gritty. Don't you remember that time that Leonardo chopped down a net with his katanas and then hit a ninja in the face with the butt of his katana?
Because they never actually use their weapons in the show.
Yeah. In the first
So
one,
frustrating.
they did. In the first movie, they did. They couldn't in the second
Raphael
movie.
In the
swore, you
comics,
guys.
they beheaded-
It's mature.
They beheaded?
They beheaded Shredder.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So
Beheader.
It's really cool. But IDW is mostly Ninja Turtles and then licensed properties.
So, okay, you talked about creators. Are these all the creators that have been working for comics for a long time? Or are people like being like, hey, this is a lucrative business. I want to draw. I want to write. And now I'm getting into comic books. So everyone kind of starts their own little indie development shop.
It's kind of what you're seeing is, but more so, it's creators that can't get in with IDW or with Image. You'd submit your artwork. You'd submit your projects. If Image says we can't do this or we don't want to work with this, they might spin off their own.
Okay.
And that's where you get IDW. That's where you get these other comics.
Wait, so
that-
obviously everyone knows DC and Marvel, and you're saying Image? Is that the one?
Image is its own
That's
publisher.
a different publisher. IDW. What other ones do we have?
So we have Image, IDW, we have Boom Studios, we have...
What does Boom Studios do?
Boom Studios does mostly licenses.
So, like, when you say licenses, I mean, like, is that like the Buffy the Vampire one? And
So we'll get to that one in
Invader
just a
Zim?
second. Yeah, like Invader Zim. Boom Studio recently did Power Rangers.
Okay.
They're still doing it. It was written by Kyle Higgins, who's a fantastic writer. I have actually...
Can I take? Hey,
Oh,
Jamie,
yeah, yeah.
Can I take it out of the protective sleeve?
Yeah.
Where's your drink, Jacob?
It's long empty, Joel.
I actually brought
They're not
that-
going to know this joke either.
that issue because it's one of the annuals, and I actually got a little teary reading that one.
For Power Rangers?
For Power Rangers.
Is it because
You're
they
sweet.
go? Wait, is it because they go to
sure it wasn't
Dunkin'
Diet
Donuts?
Squirt?
No,
what
they,
is
they
it?
actually add a lot more depth to this lore that where there's
Krispy
no
Kreme.
lore.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you know Power Rangers, it's just basically Americans smashing their Japanese toys together and making a new story. But Kyle Higgins goes in and adds legit depth and lore to Power Rangers, which there was none before.
So if no one owns a comic book, let's say Star Wars has no comic book publisher, one of these can say, hey, can we write a Star Wars comic book?
That's a very poor
Before
example.
Marvel took them. Okay.
And I'm going to push you
I'm
down.
sorry.
Because
Penalty box.
Marvel wrote the license to Star Wars in the 1960s and 70s.
Always. Okay. What about Transformers or something like that?
Transformers might go through Boom Studios. They
Okay.
might go through another one. But there is another player, and that's Dark Horse Comics.
Okay.
And I think that's where you wanted me to go.
I did.
Dark Horse.
So Dark Horse
Isn't
Comics-
that a character from Joss Whedon's mind?
That's a very good segue because
Bad Horse.
Dark Horse Comics, they do licenses. Some of the licenses are from shows that you might enjoy, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They continue to do those comics. They also do comics for Firefly. So if you wanted to...
You've read those, right?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
Firefly comics. There's actually this is just me geeking out for a second. Firefly, the TV series, ended abruptly, and then
Yes.
then Serenity, the movie, came out, the Capstone Project. But there's a lot that happens in between, and the comics, I actually bought a couple of them, fill in the gap between the TV series and the movie so well.
And if you want to learn about Shepherd Books...
Yeah, they talk about Shepherd Books history.
Yeah.
Let's say for that.
They actually do this
That's
a
another
lot,
issue.
where like Pushing Daisies ended after 2 seasons. They did a comic run for a little bit.
Yeah,
But
and
I
they'll...
still haven't finished it.
They still haven't?
I don't know if they have.
Like Buffy ended season 7 at an appropriate time, but they said, "Hey, we're going to sell some comics 10 years later." So they made seasons 8
But
and
the
9.
nice thing about
in
comics
the comic
is that
run.
the
they
actors
can.
never age. You could
Yeah.
literally, like with Firefly, there's certain characters that die at the end of Serenity.
Yeah.
You could do the comics in between the time of Firefly and Serenity, or even prequels, and
It's like a
still
big
have them all there
vignette
again.
right there, yeah.
You can freeze them in time. By the way, the Joss Whedon joke was actually about Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
Yeah, Bad
a
Horse.
character named Bad Horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making sure that came full around, and I got my...
I missed it. I had
But
no idea.
why would people know Dark Horse outside of like comic nerds?
The Mask.
The Mask and
Not the Jim Carrey one, but
No,
The
I was
Mask.
going to say, I saw... what's the difference?
wait, not the Jim Carrey one. You mean the Cher, Eric?
No, like I actually saw what's
That's
the
the
difference.
one we always think of, yeah.
Cinefix did a what's the difference between the comic book and the movie of The Mask. I had no idea how dark that comic book was. Like
That's-
it's violent and dark and gritty and horrible.
Same
And
with
then-
Men in Black.
And then what? Men in Black too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very different than the actual movie that
But
gets
then they
very
sanitize them and
sanitized.
make them comedies and put Will Smith in
Tell
it.
us more.
Now, Dark Corso is probably most famous for Mike Mignola's. His name is hard to pronounce sometimes. Mike
Yeah.
Mignola.
Filet mignonlas.
Yes. His comic book, Hellboy.
Heck boy, please.
Oh, now we can't say hell?
No, he comes from
He
the
comes from
place.
hell. It's okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Mignola actually started out as an inker. So this is one of the people that would come in and make the lines darker so that the copiers, air quotes, copiers, could actually print the comic books. And you could see the penciler's lines. He kind of got in good graces of DC. He did a couple covers for DC. One of the covers he did was Death in the Family.
Oh, yeah. It's a great one. It's Batman holding Robin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he realized I'm never really
we should
gonna-
clarify that. It's Batman holding the limp, dead body of Robin.
Thank you, Frederick
in,
Wortham.
in both of his
I
arms.
think we all got there, Joel.
There are
Yeah,
comics where
it's just
Batman
you.
is embracing Robin. Just putting that out there.
Just saying, it's a visual
When I
medium.
put together the presentation, I had to sift through a lot of pictures of Batman embracing Robin.
Yes.
Don't Google image that.
No.
Don't. Really don't.
Don't.
I have a very appropriate one in the presentation and just stop there.
Yes.
You can see that patreon.com/Baconsale.
All right. But Mike Mignola realized I'm not going to really get anywhere in my career unless I start doing my own style, my own art. So he approached Dark Horse and they said, well, what do you want to do? And he started doing Hellboy. What I think that Mike Mignola does very well is he shows a lot of his art through negative space. Now you hear that thrown around a lot. So what it is he uses the blacks of a comic book to his background's an inker to make a book look more gritty, darker.
Okay.
Right.
And he'll outline the characters by those black spaces.
Okay.
So if you look at a lot of Hellboy's art, there's a lot of black on there, there's a lot of white on there, and
That's kind of what they
how he
did with
does it.
Batman the Animated Series, and I'm sorry to bring it into
And
other
that's
kind of media.
a really good reason to bring that up because
Okay.
one of the creative consultants on Batman the Animated Series was Mike Mignola.
Perfect. Because did you know
Did
they
you know
actually...
that, Ken?
I didn't know it, actually. It's a
Let's
fun
tell you guys
stuff.
planned that.
Yeah, what's up?
Boom.
Boom. But no, I
just
don't know if you
fist
guys knew, but Batman the Animated Series was drawn on black paper, not on white paper like
I
everything else.
remember you saying
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
about 65 times in this show.
One of the most
66.
famous designs that Mike Mignola did for Batman the Animated Series was Mr. Freeze.
Okay.
He completely updated the look of Mr. Freeze from the 1960s and brought him into the modern century.
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's the one, right? Like just like that.
That physically hurt.
So here's the thing. You're bringing up all these indie developers, which for 20 years have still been indie. Like even Image Comics, which was huge in the late 90s, I would say, around 97. Even now, a lot of people, it's not a household name, right?
Image Comics, what's interesting is if you are a teenager in the early 90s, you might recognize Image Comic because you recognize Spawn. Spawn was everywhere in the 90s. Then they kind of went away for a little while. It was actually in the early 90s that a comic book, or just a kid, picked up his first comic book, Savage Dragon, published by Image, name of Robert Kirkman.
He's the one that created The Walking Dead, right?
Exactly. So he actually started writing comic books. And one of my favorite books out there is Invincible, written by Robert Kirkman.
That is literally the one that Jacob spilled that squirt on earlier.
Yep. But it's okay. It's not that specific.
I didn't
issue,
really
it's a
like that one,
story.
so
But Robert Kirkman started reading Savage Dragon, loved comic books, started getting more and more into what it means to write, develop, create comic books, applied for a job at Image. He actually pitched the idea of The Walking Dead. They said no. So he pitched Invincible and said, while I'm at it, I'm working on this. And he pitched a superhero version of The Walking Dead. And he said, it's going to be about, the first few issues, and he said, I promise there's a big twist where it's going to be revealed that the zombies are fake and it's all this alien invasion. The alien invasion never came. And it's
That's
been
how
The
he
Walking
pitched
Dead.
it.
That's
Oh,
how
wow.
he pitched it. That's how we got it greenlit.
Because it really is a simple zombie comic book story. There's really nothing
Yep.
special about it, except for the characters are really well written. But it's managed to be a phenomenon.
And that's why I would say
One of the most successful TV series of all time.
we are in the postmodern era where we're actually starting to see, because of the internet, because of a decline in traditional comic books, DC and Marvel, we're seeing more of these indie comic books come up where Image is getting its day in the light. You've seen The Walking Dead develop. There's actually going to be a high budget animated series on Amazon with Invincible. These comic book creators, or these...
What is the premise of Invincible?
Invincible is Superman, if he was sent here really... I can't say it without spoiling it, but if Superman was raised here as a teenager by his dad, who's also a superhero.
Okay.
And what if...
So it's like you have great powers. Use them right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead
Okay.
of Kevin Costner
And then
dying in a tornado.
much like the appeal of Marvel Comics in the 1960s, this is a real person dealing with real issues.
Okay.
But he's got superpowers like Superman.
Okay, I'm going to read it.
I do not recommend that one to you, though.
Not
I'm
family
just gonna-
friendly?
Not at all.
Is the Amazon series not going to be family friendly?
Probably not.
Dang it.
But they have a killer cast.
All right.
But no, you see things like this. Like you see The Boys. You see Preacher out there. These
Yeah.
are lesser known comic books.
Interesting fact. Let me kind of jump back to that. So,
We're like Team Segway here.
Team Segue. You see
We're
things like
running
The
around right now.
Boys and what was the other one? Preacher.
Preacher.
Those are published by Vertigo Comics. Now,
Oh,
Disney
no.
has subsidiaries where they publish their rated R movies.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
their PG-13 movies up until Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
DC and Marvel have the same exact thing. So DC Comics actually owns Vertigo Comics. Vertigo Comics were the ones that initially published Watchmen. But they didn't want the DC brand on it because this is a little harder for our usual reader. Same with Preacher and The Boys, both published under Vertigo.
That's all DC.
That's all DC. DC
Interesting.
also owns Young Animals. I've got some licensed comics over here, Thundercats, printed by Wildstorm, and that's kind of where DC put all their... They're owned by Warner Brothers now, so Warner Brothers says, hey, we want a comic book. We'll give that to Wildstorm. So we don't actually have to publish
Thanks,
that ourselves.
guys. I need some work.
Now, Marvel also has their own subsidiaries, but they do it a little bit different than DC. They had Marvel Knights in the 90s. Now, this is where Jim Lee and all them kind of came to prominence because, if you recall, in the 80s, Alan Moore and Frank Miller were crushing it. They all worked for DC.
Right.
So they had to relaunch with these Marvel Knights. This is a subsidiary of Marvel. They also had Star Comics. Star Comics is Marvel's family-friendly line. That's where Spider-Ham comes from.
I'm sorry, Spider Ham?
Spider-Ham. If
Wait,
you
is it a
watched
pig?
Into the
Wait,
Spider-Verse?
have you not seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, I have. I didn't realize.
pig?
I didn't know that was a real character.
Is
That's a
when
real
he was on
character.
drugs for a little bit over there.
Or what?
Wait, but Marvel's generally family friendly anyway. They're just like kids? Is kids comics?
These are kids'
Oh.
comics, just straight up for kids.
I would say neither Marvel or DC are really family friendly as far as language they can
were in the
use.
Golden Age and the Silver Age and the
Thanks
Bronze
to the
Age.
CCA.
This modern age, though.
But that's why they had these different publishing partners, because if they wanted something specifically for kids, Wildstorm will handle it for DC and Star Comics for Marvel.
I still want a show on Spider Ham.
You'll probably get it.
Kent?
I'm
No.
sure John Mulaney
Spider-Ham
would be
show.
able to-
I hate Spider-Ham.
Oh, come on.
Peter
John Mulaney's
Porker.
hilarious. He's hilarious.
No, I hated him in Spider-Verse.
But another imprint for Marvel was Marvel Unlimited, or Marvel Ultimate Marvel, sorry. And this was this was launched specifically to bring new readers in. So you had your original Marvel stuff that was been going on forever, and then they reset everything in Marvel Ultimate Marvel. Initially started to introduce young readers, but then the writers got a hold of it and it changed drastically. The only character to come out of that one really unscathed was Spider-Man,
Yeah, Miles Morales.
who's been folded into the main the main Marvel universe as they've been acquired by Disney, shut everything else down, and they only have Marvel.
Well,
comics
okay,
now.
so that brings up the question then. Because, we're looking at, over 80 years of comic books and stories.
Yeah.
And different timelines and different multiverses.
Superman in
And
85, 86 now.
yeah. But I'm thinking about, where could you possibly start? There's so many comics out there. At what point can you just jump into a story and say, okay, I'm going to follow this storyline?
Occasionally, Marvel's notorious for this. They will reset at number one. This is actually what got Marvel in financial trouble in the 90s up until
When they sold their rights to Spider-Man.
when they had the only way they could stay alive is if they pretty much butchered.
Yeah, they
the comic
declared
books.
bankruptcy in 1996.
And that's because they kept resetting. If there's a good place to jump in, my recommendation is find a character that you like and just jump in. You'll catch up eventually.
But would you say jump in, like go to a comic book shop and go buy a comic, like a single issue? Or would you say buy a graphic novel of the character you like and get into the mythology and then maybe jump around? Because it really is like different movie versions where you're like, here's one written in the 50s and here's one written in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's fine if it doesn't quite match with canon.
Yeah,
Because
you just got to
truthfully-
accept that they're not going to match with canon.
We're going to get, this is weeds, so I'm not getting here, but that's why the multiverse was created. It's getting into the weeds. The multiverse essentially says, hey, there's all these versions of the characters you love, and just be fine with it. There's many Spider-Men out there. There's many Supermen out there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they're saying, just get used to it. There's like 52 universes in DC.
Again, look at it this way. These are actors in a play. And every story is going to be different. Every interpretation of the character is going to be different. Go out, grab a quick trade. Read a couple of those. Marvel and DC have made
Quick trade?
Quick trade collection.
Trade issue.
So,
Which means, speak to the
just a
layman's-
collection of, into the weeds. It's a collection of a complete story arc.
Okay.
So in the comic book issues, they will do a story arc for 5 or 6 issues.
And an arc is a trade?
An arc is just 5 or 6 issues that tell a complete story.
Then what's a trade?
A trade is a collection of those issues.
Essentially what I call a graphic novel, right?
It's essentially a graphic novel.
It's a bound version of the story arc.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a copy of Mr. Miracle in here in my hands for the audience that can't see it. This is a 12-issue miniseries. They've collected all 12 issues and put this into what is called
And
a
cut out
trade.
the ads that are in
And they
every
cut out the
comic book.
ads.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you can read the story from beginning to end.
I like that.
It is a fantastic way to jump in if you just want to read a quick story. And then when you're ready...
How long? Wait, you say quick. How long would it take to get through that? Because that looks like a book.
Because of the way... They look a lot thicker than they are.
They do, Jacob. Honestly, like you can take home a graphic novel like that and read it in a night, easy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This took me one day. This one's a little bit thicker.
Because a lot of
Not
it is a
thicker,
visual
but
thing,
dense.
and your
Yeah.
eyes just start. One of my favorite things, and I have to say this, is one of my favorite experiences about reading comic books is when they're drawn and written so well that your eyes just flow from page to page,
Yeah.
and before you know it, you're like, "Wow, I'm done. How did that happen?" You get just pulled into the story.
And that's when you have a really good writer-artist combination. If you have a really bad one, currently in DC, they're doing Superman Year One with Frank Miller and an artist named John Romita Jr. It is physically painful for me to read because it's a bad artist and a
Terrible.
bad writer.
Yeah.
But when you have a fantastic writer and artist, like in Mr. Miracle, written by Tom King and Mr. Ards, it just flows. Or in Invincible, I've got 3 compendiums, which are a collection of like issues 0 through 47, and then issue 48 through 90 some odd. It just flows because it's a very good pairing of the artist and the writer.
We don't have a lot of time to say where everyone should start on Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, every character. But if someone has questions like, hey, I want to start reading X-Men, what should I start reading? Can they reach out to you?
Yeah, reach out to me. The best advice I can give you is download the Marvel Unlimited app, download DC Universe. They have collections of thousands of comics on there.
Online.
And you can read them on your phone.
Do you prefer paper or digital?
When you're just getting into it, go ahead, read digital. When you are ready to start reading some better comics that you just can't get digitally, some of these indie comics like Invincible or some of the more...
You like the hardbound
dense,
cover, yes.
Yeah. You're going to want to pick it up at your local library.
Yeah.
If you don't want to spend the money yet, just run to your local library.
Well, and also one thing that I do every May, the first Saturday in May is free comic book day. So you can go to your local comic book store, and they have usually a table out of a bunch of different comics, usually probably the ones they can't move, but they have or some good ones too.
They actually write
There's
specific
ones
comics for that
It'll
day.
say like comic book day, like on the corner. But I've gotten like my kids have gotten like My Little Pony, and I've gotten Doctor Who. We got a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Plants vs Zombies, like all these different kind of stuff they know, and they're reading about comics, and then they will get some superhero ones as well. But it's just a fun way for them. They get like 2 comics each, and every free go in there, get a free comic book, and walk out.
Yeah.
And my kids have like a collection of comics because of free comic book day.
Yeah, that's a fantastic place to start. But if you just want to start reading, go to the local library. That is the best place to start.
Or use
Once
the
you're
app.
ready to put some money down, it's like $9 a month. Grab one of the apps.
Oh,
Use
the apps are
library
$9 a month?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can usually mooch off somebody.
very free.
But I didn't say that. But use the library. Figure out which character you resonate with, which one you identify, which and who you want to follow.
Yeah.
And then from there you start, again, once you get the characters down, you start following specific creators. And you want to read, it doesn't matter which hero they're writing, there's a specific creator that you want to follow.
What would you say, Spencer, to people that maybe haven't read comic books because they feel they're quote unquote childish or quote unquote not real books?
Good question.
I would say go read Bone.
That one over there. The
The one
by
I
Jeff
recommended
Smith.
to you.
You said Bone is good for children, though. I mean, so if it's too childish,
Listen,
but
is
that's
this,
also a
is this
very
really the one to
family-friendly
start
book.
with? Because, listener, I'm holding this, and it weighs about 5 pounds.
Yeah.
And it's like 1,000 pages, it looks like.
You can get the individual volumes for these that are done. I like the complete collection.
1,300 pages.
But I would recommend
Oh,
Bone
he found a page
because,
number.
one, it flows very, very quickly because he has his background in animation. But the lore in Bone is so deep that, yeah, a kid can grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
But as an adult, I'm always blown away every time I read it.
Yeah, okay. Looking through, I can see, like, this is going to flow really fast.
I mean, I can finish that one in about 3 days.
It's huge.
And that's
just because there are a lot of pages that are just
yeah, you're just turning those pages constantly.
turning pages. There's no dialogue or anything. And it reads like a cartoon book. And that's the publisher, Cartoon Books.
Right.
Because
So
that's
you're
exactly
saying
what it is.
you're just saying give it a chance.
Give it a chance.
There's some real
Read.
story, real meat on these bones here. This is something worth pursuing.
Spencer, do you see yourself ever growing out of this? Or is this something that is just one of your loves that you'll continue to follow, continue to purchase? Or do you think comics die altogether?
Comics need to reinvent themselves a little bit.
I think we need to start a new era instead of the modern era, which we've been in for the past 40 years.
Postmodern era.
I think it's time, yeah.
I think they're trying to figure out how to reinvent themselves because people aren't going to comic book shops anymore. People aren't buying.
When we go on
physical-
free comic book
Well, no
day,
one goes to shops of any kind anymore, you know?
But that's where you're seeing more of these indie comics. You're going to see a lot more of these come out. You're seeing a lot of web comics. They're becoming increasingly popular, where the same caliber of story is being told for free online. So it's where are DC and Marvel going to find their home? Am I going to outgrow it? I don't think so. I've been reading comic books consistently since I was 12 years old and paying for it dearly. I don't do drugs because I can't afford it.
and because they're not good for you kids.
That too.
Those two.
There's a special issue of Spider-Man
mostly the money, though.
96 that will tell you
Go
that.
check that out. Yeah.
But it keeps evolving. And just when you think you've hit a point where you've read everything or you're starting to grow out of it, you read something new. And that inspires you to continue reading. You start with Superman saving a cat from a tree. And then you read The Long Halloween. Mm-hmm. And you start digging into these darker stories with Batman. And you think you've read everything and everything's done there. And then you read Mr. Miracle and it just kind of escalates. Or you find something new or find a new niche. Just like normal books and reading, there's different genres. There's different genres in comic books. And it's a very unique way to tell a story both visually and in written prose. And when you have just that right team, you're able to visualize and see and hear everything coming right off the page in a way that you can't do in books.
Yeah.
And
there's something magical about it.
There's something magical about it. And you're still going to draw on things from everyday life. Whenever I read a Batman story, you bet I still read it with Kevin Conroy's voice and Mark Hamill's Joker.
Man. Yeah.
But that's something that I'm just going to carry with me for the rest of my life
Sure.
as I read new comics and as I
Yeah.
read new stories. And you get different writers. We mentioned that these are plays with different characters playing the same people or different actors playing the same people. A new writer is going to come in and spice things up. It might get dry for a little while. I'm going to be completely honest. I put down Nightwing for a long time. And then Kyle Higgins came in and I had to pick it back up because something interesting happened. So it ebbs and flows with which comics you're going to read and which ones you're not going to read. But because they're able to switch out these artistic teams and assemble something new, something unique every time, it's going to keep growing and keep evolving.
Okay.
Nice.
I'm going to start collecting comic books, you guys. I don't know about you.
You already are.
I know.
Well, I love, like Spencer, I loved, like when Kent gave me those recommendations, I love being able to go there and just get these famous ones and new stories. Not even just the famous ones, just like finding a good story. And it's not even as long as a movie sometimes. You read through some of these comics, it's like basically under 2 hours and you're like, wow, that was real fun.
Yeah.
And so if you have recommendation, or if I want recommendations, I come to you and any listener also. If you want recommendations for where to start, either for you or for your kids, talk to Spencer. He's around on our social media pages. You can ping him.
He'll tell you
where can
his
people find
Twitter
you
profile soon.
specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me at Spence on the Bench on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at the Spirit of 38 Podcast. Shoot us a message. I don't get on my personal Facebook ever anymore, but I am on the podcast one.
Yeah.
So
you say
message
us.
me
Who
there.
else is on the Spirit of 38?
So the Spirit of 38 is myself, my brother-in-law Rick, and my cousin Carrie comes on occasionally, as well as my little brother. It just depends on who's in town.
And you give us an idea of like the topics that you cover, like a couple episodes you've done.
So a couple episodes, we try to do some character histories. So we really dug deep into Steve Ditko at one point. We dug really deep into Superman.
Steve Ditko?
Steve Ditko.
Yeah, the Bears.
He was the creator of Spider-Man.
Right.
We've also
Not
done
Stanley.
Yeah, we've also done reviews of specific story arcs. We'll do comic book movie reviews occasionally when something big comes out. My favorite type of story or episode that we do is we try to do character profiles of actual people. So we'd have someone like Kent or Joel or Jacob on, and we talk about how'd you get started in comic books? Why do you relate to that person? Why do you relate to that character?
That's cool. That's like a good psychological study too.
Yeah.
So there's some depth. Yeah,
Again, that's
I like
my
that.
background's in sociology, and I love to realize or learn why people relate to different comic book characters, how they've impacted your life. And at the end of the day, whether you read comic books religiously like me, or whether the only movie you've ever seen is The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Wow.
I know, low bar. Almost as low as Fanfortic.
Sure.
But whether your only exposure is through movies, it doesn't matter. We all share a common love of these characters. Mm-hmm. We've all grown up with Spider-Man. We've all grown up with
And
Superman.
also, if you read the comics, then you can be that really smart person in the room. It's like, actually, I've already read the comic. I know how this movie's going to go. People love that person.
Yes, they do. Yeah,
I read those
you
comics and
strive
I
to be
hate
that
that
person.
person.
I know.
You can find me on Twitter at Spence on the Bench. You can find The Spirit of 38 at The Spirit of 38 Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, and The Spirit of 38 on Facebook. And you can give it a listen. We try to drop episodes every Thursday. We've just coming back.
You
from,
try to drop episodes every Thursday?
every
Yeah.
other Thursday.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Every other. We're coming back from a little bit of a summer hiatus that we had last year, and we're having it again this year because
You
I've
got
had
married.
Yeah,
Yeah.
significant live
Congratulations,
events.
by the way.
So
Well, thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Spencer Michael Myers.
Thanks for
being
coming
here
on.
the show.
I love it.
Really appreciate it. And we want you guys to let us know if you are into graphic novels, if you're into comic books. Let us know what ones you like. I'm sure Spencer will love to hear what ones you have an opinion on as well. And then even if you don't, let us know what your experience is with comic books. Because, this is kind of an introductory course we've done today. We want to give some thanks, by the way, to our patrons.
Yes, we do.
People who help support the show and help keep the lights on here in the Bacon Cave. We appreciate you. And we want to say thank you to the I'm a Listener tier, which includes Josher, Greg's Guide to New Music podcast, Terry Finlay, a More Civilized podcast, Stephen Ross, and Adrian Gray. And, of course, our Bacon Council, Nicole D. Hale, Chris Anderson, Ryan Farron, and Matt Smudro. Thank you for being patrons of Bacon.
So good.
But if you want to find me, you can find me at 76Joel on Twitter, eventually. Or you can find me performing with Quickwits.
No, you never will find Joel there. You will never find Joel
At
there.
the Midvale Performing Arts Center. For more details, go to qwcomedy.com or go to the Quickwits Facebook page.
If you want to find me on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Kenny3DD. If you want to read my movie reviews, it's ShowtimeShowdown.com.
You can find me on Twitter at Jacob A. Rogers, as well as Baconsale on Twitter and on Instagram at Baconsale. Make sure you check out our merchandise store, tpublic.com/Baconsale. And as we already pitched in the very beginning, remember, you can do a Torture Jake.
Yeah.
If you join or
Good plug.
upgrade
Torture
on
Jake.
make me do whatever, I guess. Eat something weird,
Wow.
Yeah. What's the other one? Oh, yeah, watch a movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we've already got a couple in there, and I'm going to be reviewing those on Patreon in a full video review. I might mention it in the episode as well come October.
Yeah. So until next time, Spencer, I think this is where we shake hands.
Oh, what are you doing, Joel? Why are you shaking hands with him?
Now that we know who you are, I know who I am. I am not a mistake. It all makes sense. In a comic, you know how you can tell who the arch villain's going to be? He's the exact opposite of the hero. And most time they're friends, like you and me. I should have known way back when. You know why, Spencer? Because of the listener. They called me Mr. Family Friendly.
in brightest day and blackest night,
No evil shall escape my sight.
let those who worship evil's might
Beware my power.
Green Lantern's light.
Nerd alert! Space turtles! It's a
Yeah.
Bacon Cave, mother!
Yo, yo, yo.
Granola.
Yo, yo.
Granola. I'm ready to go.
What's your rapper name, Jacob Rogers?
Granola. Obviously, that's why I can't call me that.
Wow.
Your rapper name is
I've never
granola?
seen a
Yeah,
wire
I'm
man.
the whitest guy ever, right? How
is
could it not
granola?
be granola?
Wait, how does granola mean white?
White people eat granola.
Supposed to add that in post.
There you
that's
go.
that's what that was.
It
No,
was. Yeah,
I did
it was
that
so good. I
after.
couldn't tell the difference.
So wrong. I need the real thunder sometime.
There's no wrong answer. Why are you holding a knife?
I always need a luck dragon.
Everybody needs a luck dragon.
You don't get a luck dragon. You get a goblin king.
Introducing Jake to comics,
Yes.
not your kids. I brought some tonight that I could show you afterwards.
Kids?
This,
Wait, when did
Marvel
Timely Comics come
comics.
out?
This is about 1941.
Doesn't seem very timely.
We're in the golden age now, boys.
Enjoy it, fellas. We're in the golden age of comics. Draw a cigarette in Superman's hand. Golden age of comics.
He ages so well.
He does. What was he?
It's just he was supposed to be a mutated Wolverine.
A short Canadian. Hey, bub. Hey.
Yeah, bub. Teen
Nice.
Titans Go. Yeah.
What?
No,
I've never
no.
heard of that.
That's blasphemy.
But I've heard of the Teen Titans.
Wait,
Speedy
wait.
got a heroin addiction?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Wait.
Why couldn't it be cocaine
What year was this?
or meth?
He's great on Family Guy.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
That physically hurt me.
They're the toughest third graders on the class.
I don't do drugs because I can't afford it.
Oh, Walking Dead.
Jacob!
That's crazy. I think it's a ghost.
Yeah, right. Good thing I have no comic books over there.